Greetings, salutations, and all good things in between. What's up, everyone? Matt here. Hope you're having a good week. Hope you can get a lot of stuff done. Been able to get out, maybe enjoy some of the weather. It's been kind of up and down here where I'm at, so I'm trying to get out as much as I can before it drops drastically, right? So what are we doing this week? All right, you've got some good questions and some good comments that have been coming in, so I'm going to spend some time going over those. Not much on the AppSheet front. That's kind of industry standards these days. No big moves over there. For the deep dive, I have another good question. A few things that I'm gonna dive into. I've been doing some inventories of like my Patreon stuff and this, that, and whatever. So I'm gonna go over those real quick. Other than that, if you have any questions that you need answered, you got some burning questions that you're working on, that's what the end of the live stream is for. So get your questions in the comment section and I will answer them when I get around to it. Awesome. Thanks for being here. I do appreciate it. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done that, and we are off to the races. Let's go. My mic. Hello. Hey! Hey, everybody! Finally got some sound working. Sorry about that. Wow, it's been up to now. Yeah, somebody make a note in the comments of the timestamp. What is the timestamp right now? Throw it in the thing so everybody knows sound starts here. That's hilarious. Oh my God. This is too funny. So, hey, thank you everybody for sticking around however long you've been sticking around. Look at all these red warnings. Oh, that's fantastic. Oh man, look at the little mic things. Oh. 13 minutes. Yeah, see, this is me, like when I get rolling in the beginning here, I'm just kind of on a roll. Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. Looks like I gotta kind of backtrack and kind of go over what I was talking about before. That's funny. I will, it's a good thing that we can edit videos on YouTube. I'm gonna cut all that out. Okay. Welcome to the live stream, everybody. Thanks for being here. All right, I'm just going to really briefly go over all of that stuff that I was just talking about. I'm just going to kind of go over, what was I talking about? Well, I've been going through and doing an inventory of all of my Patreon supporter stuff. And I was actually rather surprised by what I found inside the Patreon folder. The thing with this is, like, it's been developing for 2 years now. Like, it started as just like a place where anytime that I made something that I thought was helpful, I kind of threw it over there and kind of left it. Been doing that for a few years now. Anytime I'm talking to somebody and they came up with like a really good table that had like a boatload of data in it or something, I'm like, hey, can I get a copy of that? Sure. And they give it to me, I throw it over there. So for 2 years now ish, that's been growing, and I've never really gone through and been like done an inventory of it. So that's what I did earlier this week, is I went through and I did an inventory of all of the stuff that's inside the Patreon folder. And so that's what I was going down here. So if I go over this really briefly, there's a whole bunch of folders inside here. I've got a folder that has a whole bunch of AppSheet protocols. So these are guides that tell you how to do something. You may have seen a previous video that I made talking about how to do multi-company security filters. And in that video, I reference a document that I'm using to help me implement the thing that I'm doing. That document is inside this folder. That's one of many. There's a few others inside here, like how to do an April Fool's type of joke. You can set that up inside your app. There's a couple versions of that. So just some, 1, 2, 3, 4, some things to look out for. That's what's inside the protocol guides. I have another one that's full of auto tables. This one is specifically devoted to, once I get an auto table stabilized, then I'll go through and I'll create a bunch of guides that tell people how to do what it is that this table is all about. And some of these auto tables require some things to do inside AppSheet in order to get them started. Like you need to put some actions in place. I need to put those actions in a view event, or I need to whatever. Like there's usually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things you need to do in order to get some of these set up. And so once I get the tables situated, I'll come through here and I'll make a bunch of guides on how to do whatever with that. That's what I'll throw inside here. The next folder is a dev checklist. So there's a publicly available dev checklist that I put out last year. I recently just made a post inside the AppSheet community talking about this. But this is actually something that somebody requested, I built it, and then I found myself using the crap out of this. And as I used it over time, I eventually found that, all right, well, I want to be able to export and import my checklist items. Because what I had done is I had come up with a final checklist for things that you need to remember to do when you finally get to that point where it's all right, we're ready to deliver this app to my client, to the users. All right. So there's some little last minute things that you should do in order to make sure that all of that's working. Things like go through all of your actions and make sure that they have a display name. Go make sure that your actions have an icon and a color that you want. Make sure that all your actions are locked down for the roles and the permissions for things that need to be. Same thing for your columns. Make sure that they all have display names and descriptions when they need them. Check all the show if formulas, all the required if things. Go through and do security filters. Go through, right? There's a boatload of these things. 2-3 dozen things that I go through at the end of delivering an app. So this folder contains not only that checklist, but also some instructions on how you can upgrade your dev checklist so that you can do the import, because there's a few changes you got to make in order to make it work. That's what's inside here. I have another folder here full of helpful tables. The idea with this one is that if somebody spends hours, days generating some kind of data set, for instance, somebody created a table that has every city in the world, every country around the globe with every city in every country. That's not a trivial thing. That took somebody a long time to assemble. Do you know what I mean? So if anybody ever needs something like that, or just a subset of that, this is a great place they could go and get it. If anybody has any other kind of tables like this that you think would be helpful for other people, give them to me. I'll throw them in here. Macros. So I don't know if you use a macro recorder, but the macro recorders are your friend, because if you've been working in AppSheet for any amount of time, you know that there's plenty of times where it's all right, I need to do the same thing that I just did to this show if formula. I need to do that to all these columns, to all of them, right? So it's all right, I got 20 columns I got to go through and do the same thing to. And then maybe the thing you're doing is relatively straightforward, all keyboard based things. Okay, go into the formula, go to the front, type the word and, hit enter, so it drops that down, go to the end, hit a comma, hit enter, type in something else, hit enter, hit close the parenthesis. Basically wrapping the whatever is there in an and with something else. Okay, that sort of scenario, that's all keyboard. You know what I mean? I can use home, end, tab, enter, bro. So if I can record the keystrokes of myself doing that, I can play that back again. Then I don't have to do it. And with macros, you can speed it up. So I can play it back so it's done. If I got to do the same thing 20 times, take the time to do it once, go through, kind of clean up the macro so it gets rid of any kind of weights or whatever. And then it's just done. Macros are your friend. So I have a folder here that contains some macros that I've recorded over time. The thing to note is macros are recorded in relation to your screen size. So if your screen is different from mine, the place that it's clicking, it's like X and Y, like it's not going to line up anymore. You'll need to adjust it a little bit, but it'll give you the idea of, things you can do to kind of make things faster. Another folder I have in there is mock data. So this is similar to the helpful tables, but more along the idea of after a while, I get to a point where I want to stress test my app and I need a lot of data in order to do that. This folder contains tables with lots of records. The primary one to point out here is this construction time logs. It's got 1,000 users, 10,000 projects, and 100,000 time logs, all interconnected and ref connected together so that you could inject these records into your system. Sure, the subject matter may be different. The point, though, is I've got 100,000 records that's connected to a table with 1,000 records and another table with 10,000 records. That gives me the ability to see how's the 1,000 record table handle it. Does it do pretty well? Cool. All right, we can leave that one alone. How's the 10,000 record one do? That one doesn't do very well. It takes 8 seconds for it to load whatever. Can we change what we need to do over there? That's the point. There's a whole bunch of other stuff inside that table, and if you have suggestions for other sample datas that I could use, let me know, and I'll put them over there. The last folder is full of scripts. I talked about this in a previous live stream where, if we've got some script that we spend, however long creating that does this amazing thing, it's kind of in everybody's best interest to share that. You know what I mean? Such as like, you got a script that archives data on the regular, looking for some flag and a date time and whatnot, and it takes it from here and it moves it over there. That'd be a helpful thing for anybody to have, because at some point, if your app gets big, you're going to want that sort of thing to happen. Do you know what I mean? So if you have any sort of helpful scripts that you've got, that you work on, that you love, that like are hardcore things that you use all the time, give them to me. I'll put them in here so we can share them with everybody, or at least all the patron supporters. The last thing is the actual Google sheet that contains all of the auto tables. If you're a Patreon supporter, this is the place to go and get all your note parameters that you're going to do. If you're going to use the standard starting template, this is the place to go and grab it. It's by far the easiest place to get them. Before I kind of finalize anything and I build the guides, which are in that auto table guides folder, they sit in here, and this is where they get kind of work all the kinks out, make sure it works all the time. So there's several things inside here that aren't inside the guides folder, but anyways, this is the primary place to go and get those. That is basically everything that I was saying when my mic wasn't working. Sorry about that, y'all. That's too funny. All right, so now if we move on to the point where we were last time, and let's talk about the questions, right? Okay, there's some really good questions that came from everybody this week on YouTube, and if we go over here, we can see. First one here comes from David Bolognese. He asks, it's all about device size. Magnets. It's all about device size, and he wants to know, how can I control the size of the screen that's being displayed on a device? Meaning, I've got a smartphone versus a tablet. How can I tell the system that we're using a smartphone? Okay, this is something that we've unfortunately been trying to work on for a while now with AppSheet. I know back in 2016, 2017, there was a lot of dedicated work by the team to get something like this to work, and the result is what we have now. Unfortunately, there is no exact way where we could say, where the system could detect this device is a smartphone, this device is a whatever. There's also no way for us to tell how wide is the screen, because that would be another way that we could do it. We could be like, well, what's the dimension of the screen, right? Because smartphone versus a tablet, the dimensions are different versus a PC, right? The closest that we got was context host. That returns if you're running it on a device and like the app is actually running through the app that's installed on the phone. Okay, context host returns device. And so that'll tell you that you're using a device, but it doesn't get you, is it a small device or a big device? Unfortunately, there is no way for us to automatically figure that out. The system does actually record like the height and width, like that's in the metadata, like it's technically there. We just don't have a function that allows us to grab that so we could put it in a formula and do something with it. So the closest we get is context host. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't build your own sort of system to do this. I mean, that's the thing with AppSheet. The tools are there. You can build anything that you want. So what do? I've done this before. A very common thing that I'll do for this is, so on the user settings is where I'll put this. You could also put it in the user record, right? But the idea is you just create a space inside your app, an enum that has 3 drop downs. What type of device are you using? Are you using a phone? Are you using a tablet? Are you using a PC? You don't really need the PC part, you know what I mean? Because context host is going to give you, is it a device or is it a browser? And so, I mean, you could get the browser. That'll tell you that they're using, it's probably a PC. You get me? So like you could just leave the 2. Is it a smartphone or a tablet or a small screen or a large screen? And the idea is you just create a space where the person can literally select this. And then they hit that. And then, you know what I mean? You just base everything off of that. So if you put it in user settings, it's a device specific setting then, because user settings are device specific. So that's where I usually put that because it makes sense. Because then when I'm on here, I can go to this user settings for the device and I can say, this is a small screen. And then when I'm on my whatever else, I can go, nope, this is a large screen. And it'll remember it for that device. That's how I handle that. I know there really isn't a good answer for that. It kind of sucks sometimes, you know, where it's like, well, you know, there's a whole bunch of workarounds that we got, but whatever. The next question comes from Anubis Veterinaria. Hey, Matt, how does your script work? The script in question they're talking about is controlling Google Contacts with a script from an AppSheet app. This was one of the first demos that I did to explore how can I execute a script from an AppSheet app. What the script does is it takes whatever contact information you just inputted into a record and it inputs that into your contacts page, your Google Contacts. So the question is, hey Matt, I'm trying to create a contact, but I haven't been able to do it yet. In the execution console, I get the following error. Exception, you do not have permission to perform this action. I did grant permissions the first time I ran the function. And then not that long afterwards, I don't understand what changed from yesterday to today. I didn't really make any changes. I just did one more test. Cut it off here. Yeah. I just did one more test to create context. It has been a frustrating and strange experience. I would like to know what is causing this from not doing what it's supposed to. Sorry for the question that no longer makes sense. It's all good. The reason that the script didn't work the first time and worked later on was probably just a matter of the permissions propagating throughout the system. You know what I mean? Like, you went in there and you loaded the script into the thing and you said authorize, and theoretically you would assume that did its ripples and worked, right? Maybe, you know, the server that it got, that request got put on was experiencing some overload or whatever, and it got, you know, pushed down into the thing because it was handling an infinite loop or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it was probably just some sort of transient error that was causing things to not kind of go the way that you were working. This is kind of common thing. It's not common, very common, but I mean, like this is a thing that happens in AppSheet a lot where it's like, well, it didn't work before and now it just magically works. I didn't change anything. Nothing changed. AppSheet hasn't released anything that we know of. Like, what changed? Well, there's probably just the server somewhere was gummed up and just needed time to kind of clear it out and get it to get what it needed done. You know what I mean? The next one comes from Tariq Hassam. He says, "Hello. How about making a user able to add data but disable them from editing to the added data? Can we make it happen in AppSheet?" The specific video they're referring to here is how to restrict editing based on the user role and a work order status. The idea being, I have a work order and I only want an admin to be able to edit that after the work order has been completed, right? So the question is, how do I make it to where a user can add data, but they can't edit the data? This is actually surprisingly straightforward. If you focus your efforts on controlling things through the actions of the table, not through the edit permissions of the table. Like, if you go to your, let's see, can I get a app open so that I can show you what I'm talking about? Let's see, here, this is a good one. Okay, so there's two places you can control the permissions for an app, right? You can either control them here inside the table settings. So I've got this sort of setting here where I can put a formula and I can say, whatever, whatnot, do it here. Or, okay, if you look at this, I have updates, add, and delete. Okay, if I go to my actions and we look at this table, I have adds, edits, and deletes. The thing that I do is, instead of trying to control the permissions through the table, I come here to actions and I control everything here. Because the only way somebody can add something to that table is by pressing this add button. Like this add action right here is that plus button that you see in the table. This add action is the little add that you see in the inline view underneath it, that is that thing. If you hide that, then they can't add anything to that table. Period. Same thing for the edit. You hide that edit action, they can't edit any of these records because the action that they need to press in order to get into the form isn't there anymore. They can't get it. Same thing for delete. It's the delete action. So I prefer to control all of my action and all my permissions for this sort of nature through the actions on the table, because they also bring with them access to some of the record data. For instance, is the user an admin? All right, we pull that from the current user record, right? So that's current user slice, blah, blah, blah. Is the work order closed? Okay, well, you can't do that kind of control on the table side because those table settings don't have access to record level details, but the actions do. So it's far easier to control stuff on the actions. So that's where I would go. And in regards to your specific question here, Tariq, how can I make it to where a user is able to add data but disable them from editing it? It's just those two actions I was just talking about. So if you have the current user system installed, just call the current user's role. And so on the condition for, go here. And so if I go to the edit action here, right, the thing I would do is I would go for my edit action on the condition. I would do something to where it's like, is the current user an admin? And in this way, only admins have the ability to edit, because this action is only going to be visible to the admins. Do you follow what I mean here? Same thing for if you wanted to control deletes, adds. So that's how you control that. It's all through those actions. It's how I prefer to do it. Next question comes from Novianto Siamud. Hope I said that right. It says, hi, Matt. I am interested in your action button that can switch between a table and a calendar. I have searched in your video, but I can't find the action. Can you tell me how to do that? Thank you. This is from the video talking about the basic types of dashboards that are out there. You have a regular dashboard, an interactive dashboard, and an enhanced dashboard, and then kind of like a combination of the two. In the video, I showed an example of how I had a button. It was like a little floating button on an enhanced dashboard that allowed me to change the detail section of the dashboard. So I could switch from having a table view of all of the records versus a calendar view of all of the records. And the question is, how did I do that? The three things, 4 or 5 things. The main point here is you need a space somewhere to store the variable of what is the user currently looking at. Like, what does the user want to see? So the way that I do this is on my user table. So I have an app here where I have a similar thing set up. So on my user table, if we look at the columns, you will see I have this one right here, dash view type. If I go inside here, you can see its type. It's an enum with 2 options, table and map. And I have it rendering as a button. This is how I do it. Literally, I have a field on the user table that is an option where they can select table or map. I'm doing a map in this instance versus a calendar, but it's the same idea, right? I have 2 different styles of view, and I need some way to tell which one I want to see. You need a space to store that. Put it in your user table, and then what I'll do is once I have that in the user table, I'll then create an action on my user table that just sets the value. It's one of these data, set the values of another column of a row to whatever. And so I have one that sets it to table, and I have a formula on here that says show this when the view type that I've selected does not equal table, right? And then I also restricted it so it only shows in a specific view, this view right here. And like that's where I got this action right here. This action that's floating is this action right here. Now, this one's visible, but here's the other side of it. Set the dash type to map. It's literally doing the exact same thing. I'm just changing the variable that I'm setting it to, changing the way that it looks, and changing the condition. But all I'm doing is I've got this button, and when I push this, I'm literally just changing the value inside this field. That's all that's happening. And then there's derivative things that happen downstream from that. So I now have the variable that I need stored as a global variable because I have my current user slice isolating my user record. Now I can just go to all of these views that I need to conform, the map, the calendar, the table, and I can put a formula inside there that says only show yourself based on when we have something selected. So if this is a table view, and if we come down here, so this only shows when the dashboard view type is set to table. That's how you do it. Hope it helps. Let me know if you need further guidance. Sometimes things like this can be a little tricky. The next question comes from VBS, and they say it's for the security filters for multi-company apps, thing I referred to before. It says, hi, thanks for sharing your knowledge. I've tried the security filters, but when I add the second one to the user table, I get a big error with a very long message saying something. Saying unable to fetch app definition, data table something is not accessible due to error. User is something, whatever. Okay, what's probably going on there is syntax, maybe. That's the thing with formulas like this in AppSheet is everything has to be exact. You can't have a comma out of place. If you do, broken. So most likely what's happening here is it's just a matter of getting the formulas kind of tweaked right. The whole idea behind the security filters is everything is cascading off of one table. So in that instance, the idea is I've got, X number of data collection tables, and then I've got a company table. Okay. The company table sits like at the top above everything else. Another name that I use for this sometimes is app instance. The idea being I want the ability to have multiple instances of this app being used at once. One group of people is using it here, another group of people is using it there, another one over there. This company or this app instance, this high level layer provides this sort of easy grouping for security like that. And the key is inside that high level layer, there's a column that has an enum list of all of the emails that are authorized to see that record. Okay, so all of the heavy lifting is done with maintaining that list of emails inside that record and then filtering that high level record based on the emails. Once that's done, everything cascades off of that. So because what you do is in all of your data tables, you include a reference column to that high level table, the company, the app instance, whatever you call it. Every table has a reference to that so that every piece of data that's collected is reference connected to one of those records over there. So if I filter that table, then everything else becomes far easier. I can just say, is this thing's app instance or its company inside the company table? Done. So it's just a matter of ensuring that like the nested formulas are appropriately doing what they need, making sure that syntax is looking at the right columns, making sure that things are spelled correctly. You know what I mean? Dot the I's, cross the T's, make sure you're looking in the right place. It can be a little tricky. The best place to get help for syntax problems, for like, my formula is not working. Why not? It's the community, because you can post, like, take a screenshot of the error, or you can copy the error. You can take a screenshot of your formula so everybody can see what you're doing. You know, you have space to provide all the details with some images and this, that, and whatever. That's really the best place to go for debugging. And if you want my comments on it or whatever, tag me at MultiTech Visions. You'll get my attention. That is that one. And I think that is the end of these questions here. There's some really good ones. I was really liking some of the detailed nuance that's starting to come out here in these questions. It'd be really interesting to, like, in a year's time, go back through and assemble some sort of, you know, collective answer over time where I'm continuing to talk about the same thing in more detail. And you know what I mean? That'd be pretty neat. All right, that's all I got for this one. Let's move on to the next section. All right, what do we got going on this week for AppSheet news? Not a whole lot. kind of industry standard these days, right? That's not necessarily true. Okay, there's no major news to report. Like, there's no big new things. Like, all these eyeball things showed up a couple of weeks ago. That was pretty big. Like, databases, that's a big thing. We don't have anything big like that. There have been a lot of updates, a lot of bug fixes, specifically centered around the new desktop UX experience. I know when they released it, there was a lot of warnings and alerts about, you know, this is not really ready for people to use. Don't do this for mission critical apps. There's straight up some things that just didn't work yet. A lot of these things are starting to get implemented. A lot of the rough edges are getting rounded out. Still not ready for prime time. I personally don't use that for any of the apps that I'm developing on. I like to go and look because, it's going to be really nice when that comes available. But it's not there yet. There is steady progress being made over there. But other than, you know, steady progress on desktop experience, that's about it. If you have any news or anything that you think is newsworthy that you would like to see in this section, I have a Google form that you can fill out. There is a link in the description of the video. Drop your thing down there and I'll talk about it. All right, let's move on to the deep dive. All right, so what do I want to talk about? The first thing that I'm going to talk about here is I want to do just some brief little overview of note parameters. So these are the magic code that goes inside the header of either a Google Sheet or an Excel file, where it's a JSON encoded bit of text, and they are literally the instructions that tell AppSheet how to conform the column in question. This is the magic that makes all of the auto tables work. This is how the dev checklist thing works. Any of these things where you add it to your app and it just does whatever, this is through these note parameters that I'm talking about. And I've never really gone through the nuts and bolts about how these work. I have with individuals who have requested to know stuff like this, but I've never made it like largely publicly available because there's some nuance, there's some difficulties, there's some things that you need to be aware of when you're using this system that make it actually rather difficult to work with. That's really cumbersome, to be honest. So that's why I've never really been like, I've never put out an app that would allow you to create your own note parameters and then rock with them the way like I have an app that I built. But it's unbelievably complex because getting these things right is, and just like an AppSheet formula, you got a comma out of place and the whole thing breaks. So they're really, really finicky. But in this little section right here, I just kind of want to go over some of the nuance involved with these, because I know there's a lot of people who are starting to pick these things apart. They're starting to use them in their like daily AppSheet flow. And if you're going to work with them on a regular basis, there's some things to be aware of. I have other videos where I've gone over this, but I'm just going to kind of go over it really briefly here again. Okay, the primary thing to note when working with these note parameters is that they only work when you're adding or moving a column. They do not work if I have a column there and I hit the regenerate, and like maybe I had the idea of I was going to maintain my column structure, my column settings through these note parameters. A lot of people think that this would be the perfect solution for, I have one table connected to 5 apps. I can use these note parameters to pass all of the settings from one app to all of the 5. The answer is you can kind of do that. Yes, but not really. The primary difficulty, the primary cumbersomeness of this system is that it only works when you add or when I'm moving a column, which if you think about, if I move a column, I'm kind of initiating the same sort of system that's there for when I'm adding it. It's like, oh, look, there's something new here. Let's do something. So it only works when you initiate that sort of system. So you can't get the settings on one, drop it on 4 other, and then like hit the regenerate button and expect that that's going to propagate over to the other ones. It doesn't work. So that's really the primary difficulty with this. And the reason I've never put it out there is because people immediately jump to that assumption. And then they get there and they're like, well, this isn't working. What's going on? And you know what I mean? So that's the thing, is that you can't use these for maintaining the columns, but you can use them to add. So if you want to get it in there, right? This is a great way. That's why it works so well as a starting template, right? Because I'm starting it. So you can't manage things through the note parameters. Another thing, some aspects of the system just simply don't work. Like you will have a formula that's creating a description, or it's an app formula, or it's the show if. And at some point, that formula can get too complex for this system to work with. And at that point, it just stops working. Like it just rejects the note parameters and they just don't work. I've been trying to suss out how and why and when and what, and like no rhyme or reason. I'm sure there is, but like trying to find it is really hard. And I've yet to really kind of nail that down. I would kind of like to start a discussion about this. Maybe we could do this inside the, I have the Discord server over there. Maybe we make a space for that. I don't know. But like, I know there's other people that are working on this, and it'd be cool to kind of compare notes. Maybe we could figure out where the limitations of all of this lie. The last thing that I'm going to throw out about this note parameter system, the last, PSA, these things are not natively supported by AppSheet. When they were implemented, they were never internally documented by the developers. So there is no rule book that the current developers can use to make this a thing. So it's not currently supported by them. They are aware of the system. They do see it. They see the benefit of it. They are trying to figure out how it works. They're getting with people like Praveen from way back when, where they're familiar with how this system works. But just be aware that this system is not supported in any way by the current engineers. And there are several things that have recently broken that used to work all the time. They just stopped. So it's, the developers have updated the system. They broke something in relation to this other thing over here because they didn't know about it. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like, this is not a thing that you should be using for a primary thing. But if you want to use it to kind of help, it can help a lot. Like I said, this is all I'm going to kind of talk about here. I just wanted to talk about the limitations of the system. If you want to know more, maybe I'll do another deep dive on this and we can, figure out more bits and pieces behind it. Anyways, that's all I'm going to talk about on this one. Let's move on to the next thing. The next one is a question from Jared Maziz. His question is, I have a daily report table which links to a number of child and grandchild records. The child tables are really just there for adding up the values from the grandchild tables. I have been setting up link to forms in my save events, which lead from the children, which are the totals tables, to the taking them directly to the grandchild. But it would be better if I could skip the child table initially and go directly to the grandchild table and start from there. Is there any way to input the parent-child link in that table and then move directly to the grandchild without the user having to travel via the child table itself? The answer is yes. The answer is always yes, right? But the solution to that is a little complicated, a little more, there's a little more involved in there. But I do have a relatively straightforward way of doing this, right? Okay, so what are we talking about? We're talking about I'm on a parent level. So the app I have here is my live stream tracking thing. And so if we just break this down, so like I have stream dates, which is like my parent level. I have segments, which is the middle, the child level. And then I have comment clips, which is my grandchild level. And basically, you're looking for a way of how can I go from my stream dates straight to the comments, right? Skipping having to go through this child table in the middle. Okay. The difficulty that you run into with that is, how does the system know what the grandchild is? Like, for instance, maybe your grandchild record is storing the information of since your grandchild records are counts, maybe your child is storing the information of where the count is happening. You know what I mean? So like the parent is, hey, we're doing inventory. And then the child record is, I'm counting the freezer. And then the grandchild are all of the counts of all of the stuff that's in the freezer. Okay, so in order for me to get to that grandchild record, the system has to know what's that middle thing. So, right, you have to have a way in order for the system to know that. Now, maybe it's just start at the top. Like I have a list of 5 locations and we just start at the top, start with the first one and then drop me into the grandchild for that. And then when we're done with that, create the next one. All right. If that's the way that you want to do this, all you got to do then is, all right, when I create my parent needs to be connected to something somewhere else that has this list of these things that need to be done. The point being, I can then say, here's the list of 5 things. Here's the list of the child records that I've made. There's none. Subtract this from this and do a loop, right? Okay. So instead of doing the loop where I say, make them all, right? I want you to just do like the loop, but don't loop. Just create the first thing. So on the form save event of the parent, reference create the first child record, right? Then take me directly to the grandchild. Now, in the grandchild, what you can do is like the action that takes you to the grandchild. I would use a link to form, obviously. And the thing I would do there is, right, we need to know, well, what's the child record? Okay, well, if you do it this way to where it's like, well, we just start at the top and we'll just work our way down. So index the last created child record from the parent. The parent has a list of all the created child records, right? And they're created in order. And so in this moment, when I'm going through the parent save event, there's no child records, there's no grandchild records. One action creates a child record. I then go to the grandchild record form. In that form, in the link to form, I'm saying, go to the list of child records for the parent and give me the last thing there. In this instance, there's only one. Okay, when we go through and once we do all of the items, I implement another link to another one of these background record creation things where it's like, okay, so the list of all of the counts for this child record is done. So what I want you to do is I want you to execute another one of those background record creation things where I have this list of the 5 things that needs to be made. I have this list of all of the child records that have been made. Okay, well, we made the first one. All right, well, we subtract these from each other. So they go away. And now I've got this list. So give me the first thing out of that and make that record. And then I drop myself into the grandchild. And the grandchild does no difference. It's the same exact action. The action is formulated to where the grandchild grabs the last created child from the parent. In this way, when I go through this process, as I keep making these child records, the one that I'm making is always the last one, is always the one that I need to link the grandchild records to. You know what I mean? And so like in this way, I can go from the parent, it'll background create the child, drop me into the grandchild, and then the child can have this information about like how many items need to be counted there if you have that list. And then I can do the same thing where I can take the grandchild list of what's been done, subtract that from the child's list of things that need to be done. And once that's empty, then I know that child record is complete. From there, I can then create the next one. And the process continues until I'm saving the grandchild record. It recognizes that there's no more child records to be created. At that point, I'd have another action that would, I don't know, take me to the detail view of the parent, or maybe the form view of the parent, or I don't know, maybe it initiates the completion of the parent. Something of this nature, but like, because I have all of these things connected together and they all had these lists of what needs to be done and what has been done and what still needs to be done, when the still needs to be done is empty, well, we know that we're done. You follow what I mean? Little complicated, little roundabout on how to get there, you know what I mean? But that's the fairly straightforward way of doing that. It's really all about having these sort of lists of what needs to be done, the remaining whatevers. Like that really is the magic that makes all of this sort of stuff work. All of these, like, do the next thing, do the next thing, do the next thing. It has to have this information about, well, what is the next thing? That's all I got for this little deep dive section, keeping it short this week. Gonna move on to the questions. Hey, Hey everybody, welcome to the live chat. Thanks for sticking around for all of this. If you have questions about what you're working on in your AppSheet app, you have a formula that you can't figure out, you have some gap in your knowledge that you're not understanding, like why does this do this but it didn't do it this time? Drop your thing in the comments and I will ask it. Let's go through and look through all the comments. Everybody commenting about how you can't comment me, how you can't hear me at the very beginning. Let's see if there are any questions. If we send more messages, nope, that's another thing. Trying to find an actual question inside here. Everybody's like, maybe we should leave. I apologize for that. Yeah, that was me messing around trying to make sure another mic was working. And yeah. And the recording of this is the exact thing that's streamed. So yeah. I'm just glad an axe murderer standing behind him. What? Parcel. We couldn't warm him. Ah! That's funny. All right. AppSheet. Let's see. All right. Room 001 says AppSheet stopped working for a few minutes this week. Did it really? Oh, I didn't even notice. I never came across that. I have an alert, like a Google alert that's just set for AppSheet. So anytime there's anything on the internet that has AppSheet on it, I get a nice little daily digest of that. You wouldn't believe the amount of spam that's showing up now. Like as soon as AppSheet was bought by Google, that alert that I got is now like every day there's 50, 60 things inside there where it's pure spam. Like the website is nothing but like, one of those like leads you to another thing, to another thing, to another thing, to another thing. Yeah, crap. Exploded when AppSheet was bought by Google. But so like every once in a while I'll see people post something inside there about how it stopped working, but it seems like they're getting pretty good at recognizing when the service is down and getting it back up right away. When previous years, it'd go down for 20 minutes, half hour, I think was probably the longest time it ever went down. And it seems like there are it's more often dropping service, but it comes back a lot faster. You know what I mean? Like it's really small, or maybe it's transient. Like people in South America are having a problem, but people in Asia aren't. It's a data center problem. Probably. David. Hello, David. Welcome, buddy. Hi, Matt. Have you ever done any app examples with a map view? Optionally, also in an enhanced interactive dashboard with filters. Yeah, I have. The difficulty with maps inside. Hello, David. The difficulty with maps in AppSheet is there's some cumbersomeness to the map integration. Part of it stems from the fact that the maps are a Google map that's being displayed. So you can only imagine there's some like weird layers inside that to make that work. So yeah, there's always been some difficulties with making maps work. And so like I generally try and steer clear as much as I can, because there's a lot of functionality that people want from a map that AppSheet simply can't deliver. Primary thing being when I tap on an icon, like I have a map and I have a little pin. When I tap on the pin, I want it to do something. Sure, it'd be great if we could do that. We've wanted that since the beginning, but that's never happened. The closest we can get is you can display a deck view at the bottom of that. But then like getting that deck view to look how you want it to be is kind of a pain in the butt, kind of a workaround. I can see why you'd want an app or a video showing about how to do all of that stuff, because there are some very specific things that you have to do in order to get that to work nicely. And yeah, no, the thing with Google Maps is like it's rough all across the board. But that being said, if you create a if you create an enhanced dashboard where I've got a control box, where I've got various different fields, where maybe I can select, what's the client I want to see, maybe the project, or like a date, range, or since we're using a map, maybe I want to limit things based on my geolocation. So only show me stuff within a 5-mile radius of me. Those sort of things do work. You create the same sort of thing. The enhanced dashboard, the actual map view is based on a slice. The slice is looking at the settings for my current user filter section, right? And based on what I do, it does that. It works. It's just the map things are a little wonky, a little rough around the edges. Maybe in the future that'll get cleaned up. Now that AppSheet's a part of Google, and so maybe the AppSheet team could conscript part of the Google Maps team to do some work on their end to make it nicer for AppSheet. You know what I mean? Like, now that it's an internal thing, maybe we could get that sort of inter-team cooperation to happen so that in a year we can have a better maps experience. But for right now, it's pretty raw. Like, another thing people really want to see with maps is like, oh, I want to see the person driving. I want to see the little pin live moving. And, AppSheet doesn't do that. See, it's like little things like that where it's like, well, I'd love to be able to do a KML layer where I could put you can, but you can't do it formulaically. So I can't dynamically base my KML layer. It's just everything is like this where it's like, well, it'd be nice, but just kind of missed the mark, Well, let's see what else. One last question here from David Bolognese. I love your last name. It's so much fun. How can you change the details you see by clicking on the pin? This is something that I cannot find. That's some of the roughness that I was referring to, where like when you're dealing with a map view, like the best way to do anything with a map is create a slice that doesn't have a formula on it, or has a formula for whatever the formula it needs to be. The whole purpose of this slice is that I'm going to make every view of the slice the map stuff. See, these are the sort of rough edges I'm talking about, where it's like, I'll create a slice of my locations, and that is my locations map data source. I'll then go create a primary inline view for that slice that is the map. But then I will also create a detail view for that map, for that slice. And it's that slice's detail view that's displayed when you're using your map on a PC or on a large screen, and you click on one of the pins and that sort of side detail page comes up. That side detail page is the detail for the slice. This is why you create the slice, because then I can control what that is. Because it's not going to use the system it's not going to use the view that you created for the base table of the slice. The system doesn't do that for whatever stupid reason. Instead, what the system does is it randomly generates a view on the fly for the slice. It creates a detail view, right? So you need to do that. Same thing for if I'm on a device and I click on one of the pins, I have a little deck view that appears down at the bottom. The deck view, you need to create a deck view for your slice. And that deck view will be the thing that controls what you see down at the bottom. It won't be the deck view for the root table of your slice. Be real nice if it was. Everything would conform like this, right? So the result that you're going to have for this is you're going to have two detail views that are essentially a clone. You're going to have your regular table detail view, and then if you want to do this map stuff, you're going to have a map detail view. And if you want these two to be the same, anytime you make a change to one, you need to remember, I got to go and change the other one. And this is where it's helpful to name these two things something very similar, like copy the name of the original one and just add the word map to the end, because then you can just search for the name and it'll give you these two views isolated out, and then you can go and be like, all right, scroll up, look at what I changed, scroll down, make the change, scroll up, what did I do, go back down. These are the things that are kind of a pain. One last question here from Anubis. Welcome, Anubis Veterinaria. Is it possible to open two web pages or more at the same time with actions? Think about that one. No, that wouldn't work. You could create a stack that would have multiple, like open a URL, like go to an external web page. The problem you're going to have there is the same problem with having multiple navigation actions inside of a stack. As soon as the first navigation thing executes off, you're taken away from wherever we were, and so the stack stops. And I imagine that's what would happen if I had a stack of open this URL, you know what I mean? If I had 3 of those, I would imagine that as soon as it did the first one, the stack would stop because the context changed. I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe in this instance it would run them all, but I'm thinking it would just stop at that first one. The way you could test this is just create 3 actions, each one that takes you to an external URL, and throw those inside of a composite action, the stack, and make that visible somewhere that somebody can push, and go push it and see what happens. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure it would probably stop though. It'd be dope if you could use that to like cascade 2, 3, 5, however many you want. That could be a very helpful thing. Good question. All right. That's what I got for this. Let's do... Oh, we'll go back over to this one and make sure the mic's working. All right, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for the good questions. I appreciate it. If you have any sort of suggestions for topics that you want me to dive into, any kind of different documents that you want me to create, if you're a Patreon supporter, anything inside those folders, if you want other things in there, let me know and I will get them done. All right, everybody. That's all I got for this week. Enjoy your weekend, stay safe, enjoy it all. And remember, when you're working on your AppSheet app and you run into a problem and you feel like you want to put your fist through the computer screen, keep calm, say it with me, and AppSheet on. All right, everybody, see you in the community.